In 2008, I was selected by the Bureau of Cultural Affairs and the Martin Luther King Historic Center to create a piece for the National Historic Site, the Martin Luther King Jr. National Historic Site. And this was such an honor for me. All the way back to my youth, I was always interested in the civil rights movement. I was interested in Martin Luther King and Mahatma Gandhi. So to be selected to create a piece for this National Historic Site was just an honor and a joy. Now, in the research that I did for this project, I was able to come up with some imagery that I felt would be meaningful to people from all over the world, significantly for the civil rights movement. So there was some imagery in the piece, the mountaintops from Martin Luther King's last speech in Memphis, where he spoke of, where his speech was, "I've been to the promised land. I've been to the mountaintops and I've seen the promised land." Should I do that over again?
No, it's okay.
It's okay? Okay, because we'll use little sections.
Yeah,
okay. So in Martin Luther King's last speech in in Martin Luther King's last speech in Memphis, Tennessee, where he addresses, "I've been to the mountaintops and I've seen the promised land." I titled the piece "The Promised Land," and the overriding imagery of this 9-foot by 14-foot piece is the crests of the mountains. Some other imagery in the piece is a pathway that the marchers would walk upon, marching for the civil rights. And the ever so famous Edmund Pettus Bridge took place also in this imagery. Hidden in the crags was also the profile of Martin Luther King and symbols of Mahatma Gandhi, where Martin Luther King got his teachings for peaceful protest. On the other side, we have Coretta Scott King and her love of music and her dedication to music as she was studying to be a stage pianist, but then moved in with the civil rights movement and made that her focus. But there was always song, always music. And I was so lucky to have a wonderful assistant that was working with me, a high school intern who was involved with theater and music, and I just had notes scattered in the imagery, and it was her idea that we actually make the musical notes say something. So you see the musical bars and the notes read, "We shall overcome." There's a series of other images as well that relate specifically, and that's one of the joys of public art for me, is to be able to do research and think about a site-specific space and make that be the emphasis of the imagery that follows. Now, while working on that sculpture for the Martin Luther King Historic Center, I started to think about the heritage of my own family, right? And my family is Jewish, and so I started to think, like, wouldn't that be an honor to create a piece in that area? And as the thought was followed by a phone call, I was asked to create a piece that was a Holocaust memorial. And this was also a real joy to create. I worked with the Greenfield Hebrew Academy, and so it's a public piece on a private piece of land, essentially. And the children of this academy painted stones so that they would understand just a smidgen of how many children passed in the Holocaust. And with these stones, we created a plinth. Initially, they wanted to create a wall, but I felt that we could rise up with the work. And there was a series of hands as well, and flames for the horrors of the Holocaust. And out of those flames, we had a ring with butterflies. There were a few poems that were written by children that were in camps, and these poems all had to do with butterflies. And at the dedication, the grandchildren of the man that this piece was made in honor of, we found those poems, and the children read those at the dedication, and that was really a joy. I also was able to speak at the dedication, and it was wonderful to be able to address this community and share these works. So along with creating the piece at the Martin Luther King Historic Center, one true joy was to be able to have the dedication at the end. And it was so magnificent. There we had this stage, and we had music, and we had the nephew of Martin Luther King, Isaac Ferris. He spoke at the dedication, and I was also able to speak at the dedication, and we had mayoral candidates speaking at this dedication. And it was such a wonderful way to celebrate the work and the research and the efforts that we put into creating this piece, and sort of share it with the community as the piece was embraced by the location. One of my favorite pieces that I've created that's in the public is called the Sun, Moon, Nautilus Passage. It's at the Atlanta Botanical Gardens, and this is the entrance to the Children's and Trustees Garden. This sculpture was created out of a conversation that I had with the director of the Atlanta Botanical Gardens. And my neighbor at the time was a stone sculptor. He was creating a green man. And as we began to discuss this possible work that I would create, it's a entrance to the Children's and Trustees Garden. And there's a walkway where you cross a bridge, and the next piece that you see on the other side of the bridge is this green man sculpture. So the director gave this book to me about the Green Man. And in my readings in this book, I kept coming across Mother Moon, Father Sun. And so since this gateway that was a functional piece, yet also a sculpture, would lead into the children's garden, it really occurred to me that it would be wonderful to include that imagery of the sun and the moon to honor the mothers and the fathers. And at that time, I was also studying a lot of sacred geometry. So while sitting at the drawing board creating the designs, I referenced a book I had on sacred geometry, and I was looking at this piece, The Vitruvian Man by Leonardo da Vinci. The imagery of the Vitruvian Man places man within the universe. And since I was creating this piece that was for children in the universe of humans, of adults, I worked with my compass and created the vesica, that's the place where all life comes from, and the intersection of circles in the same way that the Vitruvian Man is created, but with a slightly different series of numbers. And that was one of the really interesting parts of this design. Each other aspect of the design took into consideration the site-specific location of the piece. For instance, the sun and the moon for mother and father, the geometry that places children within the universe of adults. And then if you look and see on the corner sections, there are a series of stars. And while continuing to read about sacred geometry, I noticed that there was a parallel between the quintessence of man, the 5 points of our body, and a parallel with certain flowers. And so I thought, since here we were at the Botanical Gardens, how nice to bring that element of the stars, the humans, and the plants together. And as I thought about the public space, I thought, well, we have this 5-pointed star, but there's so many people with different religions, and each religion has its own shaped star. So you'll notice it has a 5-pointed star, an 8-pointed star, a 13-pointed star, a 4-pointed star, and that's to honor multiple different religions and people from all crosses of the earth, and that the stars that they may have in their symbolism would be displayed here in this piece. Now, the imagery that really stands out very bold in this piece is the chambered nautilus. And the chambered nautilus is a prime example in sacred geometry of the perfection of nature, how nature grows. And also in this space, since it was the place where it's the entrance for the children's garden, I thought about the cycle of life that children have, of how they start out small and grow and evolve and change and become huge. So that's the chambered nautilus. For a number of years, for about 2 years, I had a collaborative artist group that I organized and worked with. And this was a series of my peers. Now, this was challenging and interesting in a lot of ways. We were able to create work that pulled and stretched us out of our comfort zone. And each artist had different skills and abilities, and predominantly worked with metal and cloth. Now, we worked collaboratively with each other, and we created a series of temporary public art pieces for an exhibition in New York City, in Brooklyn, in the Dumbo Park between the Manhattan Bridge and the Brooklyn Bridge. And this piece was just so fun to create, and it was all steel and cloth, and this piece was developed out of another piece that we had done at the Museum of Contemporary Art, Georgia. And in this piece that we did at the Museum of Contemporary Art, we were able to work with a group of underserved youth that came from the East Atlanta Boys and Girls Club. And we created a collaborative sculpture together, this group of 6, and then we invited this group from the East Atlanta Boys and Girls School, East Atlanta Boys and Girls Club, and we worked collaboratively with them, as well as a group of Girl Scouts, a group of AP art students, a group that we invited just from our arts community of other peers, and it was so much fun to kind of get out of the space that we were in and invite these people in to be a part of this project. We worked with imagery around friendship and water. And it was so wonderful to see all of the different ideas that different people brought into the project. And inside of creating this project, we were able to create a series of small pieces. And the idea of working on this same thought process, on this same level within a community, of being able to collaborate, of being able to design a project and bring people in from that geography to work together is something that I really look forward to doing more of in the future. In my research of public art artists, I came across this one artist who, you know, oftentimes we think of public art and we think of this big, giant red sculpture, right? Or something along those lines. But I found this artist named Charles Simons. He was prolific in, I'd say about the 70s in New York City. He started out in Soho, but then quickly moved to the Lower East Side. He found that the reactions that he had from sort of like the blue collar or just regular people, right? Like the art people, the artists, they all sort of wrote him off. Oh, he's an artist, that's why he's making this work. But when he worked with people like really in their neighborhoods, there was something really magical that occurred. And this artist, he would create these imaginary villages, and he'd set them on windowsills or in a missing brick of a building, really tiny, microscopic pieces. Incredible imagination that went into creating these pieces, and whole philosophies and dreams and ideals behind the imagery, but yet very simple architectural forms. Sometimes he would install these pieces with little tiny tweezers, and there was something about the meditative action that occurred while he was creating these pieces. And in the process of these pieces, you know, being installed as little surprises in neighborhoods, on windowsills, inside missing brick corners, there was something really amazing, something really wonderful occurred, and that was that the people who lived in those neighborhoods really sort of developed an ownership for the pieces and began to honor the pieces and want to sort of caretake them. And something that also happened in that is wanting to just continue that feeling throughout their neighborhoods and their city streets of really respecting the areas that they lived in, and a fondness that grew and community that grew around the creation of these pieces and the caretaking of these pieces. Another area that Charles Simons also worked on in the Lower East Side was to create these sculptural gardens where actually food was grown. And this too brought community together, brought people out of their homes, and they would occasionally work collaboratively. Now, Charles Simons also began to be a part of the city politics in these areas and even go to council meetings, which is something I've done myself in working on promoting public art in areas where public art programs don't exist yet. And there's something that happens with public art where it really brings people together, it brings community together, and through the vehicle of art. And there's a philosophy that art can change the world. And I see this possible through the creation of public art, through the creation of working with communities collaboratively. And I am really looking forward to creating more and more pieces with communities, within public spaces, and I look forward to what that may look like to leave a legacy. There we go. Okay, so I look for, I'm going to start over a little bit there. We'll have to do a little cut there.
I look forward to.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
I drew a blank all of a sudden. It was legacy and planet, right? Universe, planet.
I don't have those.
Oh yeah, no, yeah. Legacy and planet. Okay, right. So I look forward to the experience of creating more public art pieces in the world. I look forward to the possibility of the legacy that I will leave behind by continuing to create pieces and have them as a gift to the world. I'm Corrina Sephora. See my artwork at CorrinaSephora.com. My name is Corrina Sephora. See my work at CorrinaSephora.com.